Hey, this is Corey from Fuel Your Photos, and today I'm going to be reviewing saltandpinephoto.com. So I like to start the review without looking at the site, so I'm going to go ahead and go to that for the first time now. Okay, and I have a set of criteria that I'm going to follow, questions that I'll answer for each site when I review them. So I will be going through that now and then just kind of talking about my general thoughts. So the first section is first impression. So my first question is, what is this website about? And I think you've done a good job here on making that clear. It's a wedding photography site. You can see we have wedding photography here. We're Seattle wedding photographers. So and obviously the wedding pictures. So that's a good solid yes. I can definitely see what the website is about. What services are offered and where is my next question. So again, this is pretty obvious, especially with the words and the pictures that are included here. Seattle wedding photographer. So you offer wedding photography at least in Seattle, and you're infatuated with travel. I can see that right here above the fold. So I'm assuming that the services are probably offered elsewhere as well. So then what's the first thing that I want to do on this site, and what do I expect to happen when I do it? So when I'm looking at this site, the first thing I want to do, I saw these images moving, but then they stopped, and I kind of want to see, okay, so it stops when I mouse over it, by the way, is what the control is there. But if I move the mouse off, then it kind of goes to the next. But what I would want to do here first is go ahead and flip through some of these just to kind of get an overview of what the work looks like, which looks really good, by the way. And yes, I expected them to do exactly what's happening now, so that's good that this is working as expected. On desktop here, the arrow controls are pretty easy to find, and again, that works as expected. So then the next thing would be, what other notable things do I want to do, and are there any things that I have a hard time doing? So the next thing I want to do is scroll down because I saw this text, and so I want to kind of read through this section. Time freezers by trade, I like that. I like that you include your dogs as part of the team. But this is good. I get to know who you are. Salt and Pine story. So I get to know more about the business. I like that you have some places you've been featured here. So that's always good for building authority. Testimonials. I'm going to flip through these, and that works as expected. Pricing. Okay, so you have everything here on one page, it seems. It seems to be really easy to read the pricing. The only thing I would say about that is that the text is pretty small. Even though I'm on my computer and I have a large monitor, I can see it fine. But I would still say that this text is still pretty small compared to today's standards of web fonts. Let's see. If we look here, this is font size 13 pixel. It's pretty standard to have 16, 18, and I've even seen a lot of people doing 20 now on some of the bigger websites and blogs. So that's one thing. I know a lot of photographers think that small fonts look better, but you got to consider readability as well. There's just a lot of text here. I think you have it organized well, but with it being so small, it is a little bit overwhelming at first, especially when we add in all of these. I do like that you have add-ons here, but you don't have any prices on the add-ons, which that's fine. You could maybe say something about, yep, there you have it right there. Contact us for add-on pricing information. That's perfect. I like it. Okay, just a small design aesthetic note here. The spacing here feels a little bit too tight. I maybe would put a little bit more spacing there. I'm really picky about, like, the amount of space here should probably match the amount of space here. It's a tiny little thing. Again, here you have, let me close the mouse bar just to make sure that's not affecting anything. Again, here when you get all the way to the bottom, it scrolls up past this section just a little bit, so there's a white block right here. Saltpine Photography, Seattle, Washington. Phone number, email, serving anywhere your venture can be found. I love it. Okay, so the only thing here is you have kind of a double footer going on. So you have a footer and then you have another footer. The other thing I would say is that it's a little bit hard to read. Like if I were trying to read this phone number, I think that's a 7, but I can't really tell if it's a 7. And this kind of looks like Y, W-A-I. So the font, I like the font, and it fits your brand that you're going for here. I think, maybe you have this font, and a regular font. And maybe you have one too many fonts on the page. This is, again, just a design opinion. I'm not going to go too much into that. But anyway, I would consider making this a little bit larger, or choosing a different font that makes it a little bit easier to read, or putting it in a solid background like this down here. So it looks like you have some other pages. These are category pages: Washington, Maine, Kansas, Colorado, destination. So I'm interested in seeing what that looks like, of course, as an SEO. I'm always interested in seeing how people are doing silos and custom category pages. All right, I'm just going to kind of go back down and go to one of the others to see if anything is different. Okay, so getting into more advanced SEO, which is really not the point of this kind of review. I will go over a couple of basic SEO things here in a minute. But a little bit more of an advanced topic is that if you're going to have kind of archive pages as hubs for main topics like these locations, then you want the content to be more unique than just a simple default archive page. Now, I know that's easier said than done because this is the default in WordPress and how it's laid out, but there are a few ways you can do it. Now, there's a couple of ways that are relatively easy to add a little bit of custom code, and you can then use the description for the category in WordPress and display it here above the photo, and you could put a couple paragraphs in there about destination weddings, and that would make the content on this page a little bit more unique. Or just when I say unique, consider that these same snippets with the images and headlines also appear somewhere else on your blog, and Google is going to generally give the credit for the content to the page or pages that are most relevant for the topic. So this doesn't really give a whole lot of weight around destination, because really there's nothing here that's unique other than a grouping of posts, which it's a good way to do things if you can customize this just a little bit more. In that case, I would say that's a good thing to have in a footer. But if you're not going to build out those custom category pages a little bit more, then I would say it's probably not helping very much from an SEO perspective. From a usability perspective, it's fine. But if you're trying to rank for these other things, then I would say you need to build out some custom content. Now, if that's something that seems too advanced with WordPress, it's not hard to hire someone to do something like that for you for probably maybe $25 to $50 per page. You could probably get a WordPress developer to do something like that. It's not a very difficult task. It's just a matter of setting up category templates. And again, you can do a little hack there and just add some code to one page or a couple pages and be able to use that description. So I'm not going to go too much more into that. It's a little bit more of an advanced topic. Okay, so let's go back to the home page for a second. Now, one other little design thing with spacing. This is really tight right here in the header. I maybe would put, at least 5 to 10 pixel padding around this logo if possible. Okay, is there anything else that I want to do? I do like how you have the kind of the main information all on one page. I'm becoming more and more of a fan of at least hybrid one-page sites where a lot of information is on the home page. I do love the fact that you have lots of text on the home page. And pretty much any information that someone wants to find, a good overview of your portfolio. Let's see if this is the H1. We're going to go ahead and turn on the Moz bar and do a little bit of the quick SEO analysis. Okay, so H1 Seattle wedding photographers. Okay, so you have multiple H1s on the page. I would recommend trying to figure out if you can take these other things and make them H2s, and that way, and you can still keep the same formatting. It might take a little bit of custom CSS, but it's not too hard if you want to do something like that. Just so that you have one main page heading, which is we are Seattle wedding photographers, and then these are kind of like your sub headings of, for each section. That should be H2s. Now, right now you have an H2 as an entire section here. Let's see which one. This is an H2. Now this should be a paragraph tag, not an H2, and so it looks like you're maybe using headings as ways of styling instead of ways to structure your page. And so it's one of those things. Your page is easy enough to parse. It's not going to be a major problem. However, having good organized content on your page does make it much easier to crawl and understand the intent of your page, and intent is becoming more and more important as time goes on. So fixing things like heading structure, so you have one H1 paragraph, an H2, so it would be like the main heading, something you say, a subheading, something you say, and each page should only have one H1. You can have as many H2s as are reasonable, and you can have H3s under the H2s. Okay, I'm not going to go too much more into that, but just wanted to mention that headings is one of the categories here under my SEO checklist. So domain issues, because you're on WordPress, it looks like all this is taken care of. If we go to, for example, the non-www, it redirects with 301. We can see that here if we look at that. Well, it didn't do it, but yes, that is working correctly. Doesn't look like you have any other URL issues there. Page title, let's go back here. Seattle wedding photographer, Salt and Pine. Seattle wedding photographer, Salt and Pine. So this is a problem. Looks like you're doubling the page title. Let's see how that actually looks in Google. Okay, so Google's picking it up okay. They're parsing that and understanding that it's intended to only be done once, or they're rewriting it. But it looks like this is duplicated. In that case, what's probably happening is you probably have, if we look at, hang on. Actually, let's not do that right now. Close that. You probably have some kind of plugin that's adding some metadata. I could probably find it all, but again, try not to go too deep on these. Just want to let you know that that is something that's going on here. It looks like there's a duplicate. Okay, so now back here, same thing on that secondary page. Let's go back to the home. And if we look at this, let's see, meta description. That looks good. Love it. And then headings we already talked about. Body copy, I already told you have a great amount of body copy. And then let's look at alt text here in Moz. It's like the hashtags are probably coming from that Instagram plugin. But everything else looks good. All of these are looking awesome. So you're doing great with your alt text there as well. Perfect descriptions of these photos. Love it. Perfect. You're doing a great job with all of that on the home page here. I'm not going to check every page for that kind of thing, but you're definitely doing a good job. This is a tiny little issue, but I hate that it has this scrolling bar here. Okay, so let's do one other thing here. Let's check. Says page load time 3.1. I may have some caching. Let's do an insights and see what we get. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to do one more thing here, and that is, well, actually, sorry, let me back up one more time. Other things that I want to do. Now we scrolled down, and it's taking us through the contact page. So that's great. I can contact you there, but I want to see the portfolio as well, and maybe even read the blog. So let's just make sure that does what I expect it to do. Peek at our portfolio. Look at Love it. I love the masonry grid. I love that you have the fact that it doesn't load everything for slow connections, and you can choose to load more. That's all perfect. See what happens if I click one. Lightbox, easy to navigate. I'll check it on the phone in a second. All right, and then blog. Okay, that looks easy enough to kind of get an overview of what's going on here, and then go check out the blog posts. Your blog titles are looking great too. Let me go back. The only thing I would say about the blog titles, though, I said that before I looked at multiple blog titles. You're using Seattle wedding photographers in a lot of your blog posts, and I would highly recommend varying that up so that you don't need to use your main keyword in every single blog post. You're going to cannibalize the results, which means that you're going to make all these pages competing with each other to the point where Google's going to say, well, if all of these pages are about Seattle wedding photographers, then we're going to just have to consider that none of them are about Seattle wedding photographers. That's a little extreme. It doesn't quite work like that, but kind of. That's the idea, is that if you want your home page to be about Seattle wedding photographers and rank for that, then you need to point these other pages that have context that show that you're a Seattle wedding photographer because you shoot at venues and locations in Seattle. You can point them back to the home page with words like Seattle wedding photographer, potentially, if you want to try to do something like that. It's not even necessarily a major factor, but the point is, you don't need to add the Seattle wedding photographers on the end of every blog post because they're very unlikely to rank for it, and you're also not necessarily helping your site to rank for that by adding it on all these blog posts. As long as these other locations are in Seattle and you mention Seattle in the text naturally, I think that's all you need to do. I'm not going to go too much more into that, but just a quick thought for you there. All right, so the last thing we're going to do here is go to, let me see what that looks like. Okay, that's fine. Not my favorite thing to have in the main navigation, but if that's how you want to do it, that's totally personal opinion, and that's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the console. And I don't have my phone hooked up today. I left my cord in my bag, but we're just going to look at this as a phone. Now, I'm actually going to turn on some throttling. We're going to do good 3G, and we'll disable the page caching, and we'll refresh this. Actually, I want to stop it and refresh it one more time. There we go. So what we're doing here when we do throttling is we're seeing how your site would load on 3G network, pretty good 3G network. And so it's a little bit slow. Let's see what page speed insights say. 43 on mobile, that's pretty low. 47 on desktop, that's pretty low as well. And it's telling you that you need to optimize your images and leverage browser caching. Again, this is one of those things, sometimes you can fix it, but it's a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to talk about all of that. But notice how long it's taking to load some of these images here. Let's see if we can look at which of these. Let's do, let's rank these by the size and see. So 230 kilobytes. I mean, these are not huge images. Let's see what Google says, how much we could save. Google seems to think you could save quite a bit on some of these. Let's see this one. Well, so that's something you could potentially run these through something like JPEG Mini, or you can even go down here and download the images that Google will compress with their own compression engine, and you can get pretty good results that way and re-upload and all that kind of stuff. Be careful if you do that because you need to make sure that your images keep the same URLs if they're currently ranking in Google image search. Otherwise, Google will de-index and have to re-index. It's not usually a big problem, but it can take a while, and sometimes it can knock you out of the rankings for image search if that's something that you're concerned about. Anyway, let's go back here. So, loads in approximately 15 seconds on mobile, you were starting to get something which is at least better than a blank screen. Let's go ahead and, on mobile, I want this to be swipeable. I'm not on a phone, so I can't be 100% sure, but usually this does a pretty good job of mimicking touch behavior. Let me see if I just make sure I have that turned. I think there's an option where I can turn it on or off. So I may be wrong about that, but let's just say for right now, you want to make sure that this is scrollable. But your arrows are nice and big, so it is obvious that you can use those. So I'm going to scroll down here. The font is a good bit easier to read on mobile. That looks better on mobile. Maybe consider centering these. A lot of spacing here. Again, you got the double footer thing going on. I'm not sure. Again, one of those things that may or may not happen on a phone, but on this it's not letting me. Let's just assume that this is going to work appropriately on desktop, but if it doesn't, that's something you need to check into. It's testing with an iPhone 6 screen size. Looks okay in landscape as well. All right, so you definitely, your site's definitely responsive and working pretty well. There's a couple little bugs that you could fix, but whose site doesn't have bugs? Pretty much everyone has those little things. Hopefully, they pointed out a few that maybe you can look into. I definitely work on trying to squeeze every bit that you can out of the image compression and see if maybe you can get that Google page speed up a little bit, and just not even worried so much about Google page speed insights, but more so about how fast it actually loads on mobile. And remember that not everyone has a super fast connection, and I'm assuming you probably know that out here in the Pacific Northwest, in the mountains. If you go out, if someone lives in kind of the middle of nowhere, they're probably not going to have an excellent connection, and you want to make sure that they're able to at least get content that they can see pretty quickly. So that's the end of my review for you. You're actually doing a really good job with your site. I love it. As far as, you've got a lot of the right things optimized. There's a few little things that can be fixed. You want to look and see what's causing that duplication issue with your titles, because it could mean that there's some other things going on behind the scenes that are not cleaned up. Your title hierarchy or your heading hierarchy on your homepage could be fixed, and you have some little gaps and things that could be fixed. But overall, I would say, you got a really great score here. Other than the speed, that's something that, it's pretty image heavy, and it seemed, in one case it said it was loading in 3 seconds. In another case, you're getting slow, and the throttling made it really slow. So just something to consider. You're trying to find that balance. But I think overall you've done a really good job, so congratulations on that. If you have any other questions, of course, come over to the Fuel Your Photos Facebook group and ask anything that you have there. For anyone else watching who is interested in getting your website reviewed, all you have to do is go to fuelyourphotos.com/reviews, and I'll be happy to add you to my list and do a review for you. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to have more reviews like this coming out, as well as plenty of other tips on how to fix a lot of the issues that we talk about in these reviews. So hopefully I'll be talking to all of you soon over in the Facebook group.